3 years into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. As a freelancer, I hadn't had income for a while, so I had to ask my husband to help with our living expenses. And then, my husband said this, looking down on me.
I won't give any money to a useless parasite like you.
What?
I won't be contributing to our living expenses anymore. You will have to manage with your own money.
And that's how my husband really stopped providing for my living expenses. Not only did he stop giving me money for groceries, but he also didn't contribute a single cent towards rent and utility bills. What's worse, he finally also started dipping into my savings for my single days. I won't forgive him. I will make him regret this. And so, my retaliation began. My name is Serena Ferguson. I'm a 30-year-old working wife. I met my husband Jonathan when I was single and working at a design company. I joined the company as a designer, and Jonathan worked in sales. We became close as we worked on several projects together. After being invited by Jonathan to have a few meals together, we started dating. In our second year of dating, Jonathan proposed to me.
Serena, will you marry me? I will definitely make you happy.
Jonathan, thank you. Of course I will marry you. As I gazed at the ring he had just given me, Jonathan said,
There is one thing I'd like to ask.
What is it?
After we get married, could you quit your job? It would be awkward for us to work at the same company as a married couple, don't you think?
I was taken aback. At that time, I was at the high point in my career as a designer, and I was considered a valuable asset at the company. I enjoyed my work and felt fulfilled, so I couldn't accept his request right away. But I want to keep working even after we get married.
In that case, why don't you switch to a different company or become a freelancer? Come on, Serena, please.
Well, I understand. And that's how I ended up leaving my job at the company. My boss at the time, Michelle, who was a good friend of mine, and others were sorry to see me go. On my last day of work, Serena, it's sad to part ways even though we've been working hard together. I feel the same way. Let's stay in touch and we can go out for a meal sometime. I too left my job with a heavy heart because deep down, I wanted to stay at the company. We then rented an apartment near Jason's office and our married life began. Upon getting married, I decided to become a freelancer working from home. When I informed Jonathan about this, he said the following.
Oh, being a freelancer is fine, but remember, we agreed to split the living expenses evenly.
We had discussed this before getting married, that we would both work and split the household expenses. However, it was at Jonathan's request that I quit my job and had to start from scratch to find clients. That being said, could you consider giving me a bit more until my job stabilizes? Since I have no income from the company now, and I will need to start looking for work from scratch. Even after I said this, Jonathan only made a displeased face.
Huh? Don't be so dependent. Are you trying to rely on me like that? I like the independent you know.
I understand. In this way, I ended up shouldering half of the household expenses, even during difficult times. Fortunately, I received a severance package, so I continued to break into my savings to supplement the household budget. Jonathan should have been earning sufficient income, yet he only contributed exactly half of his salary to the household. Even though the household expenses are shared, he didn't do any chores. So as a result, I automatically took on all of the household chores. I managed to handle household chores in between my busy work schedule. And so, On a certain day in the third year of our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. It was a surprising and joyful moment, as we had been having trouble conceiving. On the night when the pregnancy was confirmed at the OBGYN clinic, I told Jonathan, "Hey Jonathan, I think I'm having a baby."
What? Seriously? I'm so happy.
My husband smiled again and expressed his joy. I hadn't felt true happiness in a long time. However, right after that, a problem arose. My morning sickness was quite severe. I felt like I had motion sickness all day long and rushed to the toilet daily. I couldn't do my job properly, so I reluctantly had to stop all of my work. I went days without eating properly, lying on the floor. In the midst of this, Jonathan came home and called out to me as I lay in bed.
Hey, Serena, what about today's meal?
With the aroma of food wafting around, it's impossible for me, who is suffering, to prepare a meal. I'm sorry. I haven't been able to make food because I'm not feeling well due to morning sickness.
Huh? What are you doing? Preparing your husband's meal is also a wife's duty, right?
I'm sorry. Could you bear with frozen food for today? When I said that, Jonathan responded with annoyance.
Frozen food? I don't want to eat that crap. I'm going out to eat.
With that, Jonathan left without even asking about my meal. No words of sympathy, and he wouldn't do any housework either. I was growing increasingly frustrated with a husband who lacked understanding about my morning sickness, and his troublesome behavior didn't end there. One night, while I was lying down with a pale face due to nausea, Jonathan whispered in my ear,
Hey, Serena, isn't it about time?
Ignoring me, he tried to touch my body. I instantly grabbed his hand to stop him.
What's wrong? Not allowed?
Of course not. It's still early in the pregnancy, and you don't understand how tough the morning sickness is. I calmly told him this, but it seemed to make Jonathan angry.
What's the matter? Taking care of your husband is wife's duty, isn't it?
There is such a thing as timing and appropriateness. Haven't I complained multiple times about how hard morning sickness is?
Come on, you sit there for a moment.
Jonathan's words were so harsh that I woke up with a start. My husband crossed his arms and stared at me.
Are you using morning sickness as an excuse to slack off on various things?
Even if you say that, I can't eat properly, you know.
Pregnancy isn't an illness, you know. It doesn't give you the right to neglect household chores or the wife's role.
I couldn't help but get upset at his way of speaking. And yet, you, Jonathan, don't lift a finger to help with the housework. You, as a husband, aren't covering for your wife who is suffering during pregnancy. What about that?
What? You want to argue with me?
But I finally couldn't hold back my tears. Seeing me looking down and sniffing my nose, Jonathan clicked his tongue.
That's enough. I'm not coming home today.
Huh? It's already late at night. Where are you going at this hour?
Anywhere is fine. I don't want to see your face.
He slammed the door shut with a loud noise. On that day, Jonathan truly didn't return. Later, my morning sickness subsided, but there was an awkward atmosphere between me and my husband. However, I had something to tell Jonathan. Due to the time I took off for morning sickness, my income had significantly decreased, making it difficult to contribute the same amount to our living expenses. With hesitation, I talked to my husband. You know, Jonathan, there is something I need to talk to you about. I told him that I'd like him to wait for a while regarding the living expenses, and during that time, I needed his support. In response, Jonathan said this with a blank expression.
Are you saying you can't contribute to the living expenses because of morning sickness?
Yes, I'm a freelancer, and there's not much I can do about it, right? I'm going to be working again when the baby is born. So I was wondering if I could ask for some money to live on until then. In response, Jonathan said this while looking down on me.
I'm not giving money to a useless parasite like you.
What?
I won't contribute to the living expenses anymore. So figure it out with your own money.
What? What are you saying? I'm pregnant, and the baby is going to be born soon. Jonathan sighed at my plea.
If you don't want to be called useless, you better work hard with that big belly. Don't rely on me. I have no obligation to take care of the parasite like you. Ha!
And so, Jonathan indeed stopped providing for the living expenses. Not a single cent for food, let alone rent and utilities. I had no choice but to dip into my business savings to make ends meet. While enduring this difficult life, I worked hard for the sake of our unborn child, even though my pregnancy was progressing. Aside from the business savings, I had about $50,000 in savings from my single days, but I didn't want to touch it unless it was absolutely necessary. During this time, my husband would still come home and freely enjoy the meals I prepared, despite not contributing to our living expenses. As my belly started to swell, he showed no concern, and he frequently mentioned working overtime and taking on weekend shifts, often leaving the house and completely neglecting all household chores. Although divorce had crossed my mind many times, I thought to myself, maybe Jonathan will change his mind when he sees the kid's face. I also don't want to act selfishly and take the child's father away. I continued to endure this kind of life, and one day, when I was 8 months pregnant, something unexpected happened. I received a sudden phone call from Michelle, a former colleague and friend. Hello, Serena. How have you been? It's been a while, Michelle. Thanks to you, I'm already 8 months pregnant. I'm doing well. Though I was exhausted from my busy work and frugal life, I replied cheerfully. Then, Michelle invites me to have a cup of tea after a long time. I agreed with that, wanting to let off some steam. 2 days later, we met up at the cafe and were happy to see each other again. As we enjoyed some cake, Michelle hesitated and began with a difficult topic. You know, Serena, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but... Huh? What, Michelle? How are things going with Jonathan lately? I was at a loss for words, and Michelle showed me something on her phone. It was a photo of Jonathan and an unfamiliar woman appearing close in an empty company meeting room. What's this? Well, there's been some talk at work about Jonathan and Julia, this female colleague. Michelle's story went like this. A young female employee named Julia joined the company a year ago and became Jonathan's subordinate. Over time, rumors began to circulate about their closeness, such as they went for a business meeting and didn't return for a long time, or they were seen getting close in the office. The photos Michelle showed me were circulating around the office. Is Jonathan having an affair? It's still just a rumor, and I don't have concrete evidence. I'm sorry for telling you this while you're pregnant, Serena. I was in shock, but appreciated Michelle's concern. She continued, Julia here actually seems to be doing well these days, bringing brand name bags to the office. Oh, really? You might want to check the financial aspect once. There are even rumors that Jonathan is financially supporting her. Yeah, I understand. I will check it out. The rumors that started circulating within the company coincided with a period when I was experiencing morning sickness. Julia, the woman who benefited from Jonathan after he stopped providing for my living expenses. There is undoubtedly a connection. After thanking Michelle and parting ways, I hurried home to check our joint bank account. To my shock, the checking account had decreased by about $15,000. Over the past 6 months, there have been several instances where Jonathan withdrew thousands of dollars. Trembling, I put the checkbook away and checked the balance in my bank account from my single days online. What I saw left me in shock. The $50,000 I once had saved had dwindled to $25,000. What's more, there were withdrawals from 2 months ago that I couldn't account for. At that moment, I felt something inside me snap. He not only stopped providing for our living expenses, but also touched my savings for my single days. I won't forgive this. I will make him pay dearly. I vowed revenge against Jonathan at that moment. I then changed the PIN of my account and took steps to prevent further withdrawals. However, I decided not to confront Jonathan directly, but rather to gather evidence. I spent what little money I had left on hiring a private investigator to look into his activities. 2 weeks later on a certain night, in a shady motel parking lot in the middle of town, I sat quietly in Jonathan's car, which he had parked there. Before long, Jonathan and Julia got into the car. Jonathan, unaware of me in the back seat, attempted to start the engine. And in that moment, I whispered to him like this, "You seems to be having quite a bit of fun, didn't you?"
Gah!
Jonathan jumped in surprise. Julia, too, froze and looked my way.
Serena, why are you here?
I knew you two were here together, so I decided to lay in wait. What were you two doing together? In a stern voice, I inquired, and Jonathan's eyes darted around.
Well, a junior colleague at work wasn't feeling well, so I was just accompanying her.
At Jonathan's feeble explanation, I threw a bunch of photos at him. In those photos were numerous pieces of undeniable evidence of their affair. There was no way to deny any of them.
What the hell? You investigated me?
Of course. You thought you could deplete people's savings and I wouldn't find out? Now, admit it with your own mouth. Reluctantly, Jonathan began to speak. My severe morning sickness had made it impossible for me to be intimate during that time, which is when Jonathan's relationship with Julia began. He had been buying things for Julia, who was younger and good at sweet talking, indulging her desire. Oh, I see. I understand now. Did this man also buy that designer bag for you, Julia? Julia held the designer bag in her hands with a pale face. Well, this is... You're an adult, so you should know what happens when you get involved with someone else's husband, right? I will demand compensation from you. Be prepared. Julia slumped in disappointment. Then Jonathan stammered as he spoke.
We are not getting divorced, right? And a child is on the way. I won't do something like this again, I promise.
I glared at Jonathan and shouted as I cut him off. There is no way that's happening, you fool. I'm divorcing you. And I'll definitely demand compensation for the affair and child support. You will return the money you spent, even if it means going to court.
What?
Jonathan turned pale and stammered. That's when I dropped another bombshell. By the way, it seems like both of you are doing indecent things during working hours, right? I've already sent proof of that to your company.
Huh? If you do something like that? Look forward to your consequences, you scum. Both of you are going to hell.
In this way, I left them in a state of panic, got out of the car, and left the scene. Later on, Jonathan and I got divorced. I demanded compensation for the affair and repayment of the money he spent from my single days. Jonathan paid it, and his savings were completely wiped off. We agreed on child support payments to be made monthly. As a result of my report to the company about their affair during working hours, Jonathan and Julia were both fired from their jobs. I also demanded compensation from Julia. Julia had to sell her designer items, but it still wasn't enough, so her parents helped her financially. Her parents were furious and forcefully took her back to their hometown. This marked the complete end of Jonathan and Julia's relationship. Jobless and broke, Jonathan joined a part-time job at a horror-themed park and worked as a costumed performer to find a new job. I hope he reflects on what he has done and lives the rest of his life responsibly. On the other hand, I safely gave birth to a lovely baby girl and returned to my parents' home. My freelance work is going well, and it seems I can manage to raise my daughter on my own. My daughter is growing up, receiving love from both my parents and friends like Michelle. From now on, I would like to live cheerfully and look forward to my daughter's growth.